Hi everyone, welcome to ACAB True Crime. Today I am releasing my first video of a series that I'm starting on my channel called Trained Forensic Psychologist Reacts. Um, and that'll just be a series of videos where I'll put out just my thoughts on certain cases or current events that are going on that pertain to psychology, mental health, um, law, crime, and probably other things too. So, the first video that I'm going to do in this series is going to be the case that is just kind of wrapping up in current time in Green Bay, Wisconsin, and that is the case involving Taylor Schabusiness, who is the perpetrator in this incident or crime, and the victim, who is Shad. His last name, I'm not exactly positive. Thyroin, I think, is maybe how you pronounce it. Um, and yeah, so let's jump right in. Oh, what I also will say, uh, even though I do have, a pretty extensive history in the mental health and criminal justice field, this channel is 100% specifically for entertainment purposes only. So everyone that I talk about um, is presumed to be innocent until they're proven guilty. And I'm um, maybe offering opinions on diagnostic impressions, but I'm in no means um, giving any type of diagnoses out. I will be generalizing to the type of symptoms that I'm seeing in certain people, but not specifically for that person. And also, I won't be giving out like mental health advice or anything like that. So, again, everything that I'm stating, they're just opinions, not facts. And this channel is for entertainment purposes. So, just to put that out there. Um, and the other thing that I wanted to say too is like I really do want my channel to be like a safe community for everyone to come and share opinions, and for it to be a space like safe place where people can kind of discuss more nuanced concepts um, plaguing our society, especially like within the criminal justice field. So I just want to um, put that out there that everyone's thoughts and opinions are welcome, but um, I will be offering up counter facts against certain people's opinions that maybe I don't agree with, and blah blah blah. So, but I do want it to be a place where people can feel comfortable, like that they won't get attacked. I will always make it be a constructive conversation if anything gets weird, but I do feel like I will be providing opinions that maybe not a lot of people will agree with, but we'll just have to see moving forward. Okay, so the thing that I want to, I think, address the most in this video is just my thoughts and reactions about the way that the jury found in this case. Um, so let's I'll give you a little bit. Okay. So the thing that's weird about Wisconsin, and I'm not sure, if this is true for other states as well, but there is two phases to the trial process in terms of criminal cases in Wisconsin. One is to determine whether or not the person is responsible for committing that crime that they're accused of. And then the second phase, um, if it goes to that phase, I guess, is determining whether or not the individual that was found responsible for committing those crimes is also responsible because they're mentally intact. So, in other words, the second phase is basically to determine if they're not guilty due to mental conditions or defects at the time of the crime. So, this is my cat Leela, by the way. Um, you might have met her in previous videos. If not, I highly recommend checking out because she makes an appearance in almost all of them. Anyways, so yeah, Taylor Schabusiness, the thing that's interesting about this case is, um, and the way that the jury found it is just so confusing to me, and that's kind of what I wanted to talk about, and I don't really know how it benefits anybody involved in terms of having the jury find that way, and maybe questioning just the system itself and like getting into that. So that's just a little preview of what's to come in this video, but I will be brief. So anyways, I will just give you a little background on the crime. So this is a crime between that Taylor Business was found guilty of last Thursday, I believe July 28th, I think. Um, and it involved Taylor and a friend of hers named Shad. So the two of them, so they're both from the Green Bay, Wisconsin area, and the two of them went to like grade school together, like kind of grew up together. I think they dated briefly in high school or something, but then Taylor ended up moving to Texas and meeting Mr. Business and having a baby. And then she ended up moving back to Wisconsin after Mr. Business ended up going to prison for um, like methamphetamine distribution or intent to distribute, maybe. And the child is currently with the paternal grandparents in Texas. So that would be Mr. Business's parents. And I know that Mr. Business has spoken out about this particular um, crime that I'm discussing today involving Taylor. And it sounds like he is planning on, I mean, I think he still considers himself married to her. At least that's from what I heard. I guess I haven't checked anything updated. That's just what I heard in some of my research. Anyways, so Taylor had a different name growing up. I think it like started with a C or something. And the guy that she met, he was a different name that kind of sounded like Shabusiness. So then they both changed it to Shabusiness. But that's none of my business anyways. Just kidding. So anyways, the when Taylor came back to Wisconsin, um, after Mr. Business went to prison for I think he said that his sentence was like 18 months or 24 months or something. Anyways, she was planning on going back up to Wisconsin, and her dad testified that she um had struggled with substance abuse. So I think at the time of the crime, she had been a meth user. I'm pretty sure that her and the victim, Shad, were smoking meth together, maybe, or Tia, or whatever they call it these days. Um, but so yeah, I guess Shad and Taylor met back up when she got back to Wisconsin, and they were just like hanging out kind of as homies, but then they were like smoking, and then sounded like they kind of started fooling around and got into some kinky kind of sex stuff, and then um they ended up using a metal dog collar, like a choke collar dog, and Taylor ended up strangling Chad, and so he passed away. And then um, just the rest of the details about what she did after that are pretty gory and gruesome. So I will spare you some of the more really weird ones, but she basically was found guilty of like dismembering a um, unalive body, and then also um, doing inappropriate things sexually to the deceased body. Um, and she also, so, okay, I'll just give you the whole, like, right. So Shad and Taylor were hanging out over at Shad and um, his mom's house, and they were, smoking and, you know, having kinky sex in the basement. And then Shad's mom heard someone leaving, and so she went to go check out what was going on down in the basement, and she like was like thought she saw her son's like head in a bucket, and she was like she went and like told her partner like, am I is this actually happening? Like she had obviously was like in shock and like probably not believing that she just saw that. And then, I heard a little bit of the 911 call, and it's like her partner is like talking to the police, and he was like, yeah, I don't know. Because they were like, so do you think it's like his head? And he's like, I don't know, I can't see very well. Like, he's like, yeah, I think that that's it. So, like, unfortunately, Chad's mom like found his head in a bucket. And then I guess once the police got there, like they kind of started to figure out, like, try to, piece together the puzzle pieces of the crime, and it wasn't hard at all. It sounded like Taylor Schabusiness did not really do much to cover her tracks. She, I guess so, like, yeah, she like sped off in the middle of the night, which like got Chad's mom like, up and alerted to what was going on, and then she knew Taylor and saw that Taylor was hanging out with Chad. So she was able to tell the police, like, yeah, he was hanging out with Taylor, blah, 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 from high school. And they were like, oh, okay. So they were able to figure out, like, who she was. And they went and, like, found her at her apartment or her house or whatever. And, like, when they showed up, there literally was, like, tracks of footprints and blood leading up to her house. So it's like, and she had like blood all over the car, and I think she had it on herself. Like, she obviously had not like, tried too hard to really like cover up her tracks along the way when she was trying to like, do stuff. And then it sounded like they also found, so what she ended up doing was obviously like she, you know, took off the head, and then it sounded like she also like had different parts of his body that she was like kind of putting around in different places. Like, I think they found some in the car, and then I think in places in the house or something. Um, but again, like it didn't sound like anything was, difficult at all to find. Like, it's not like she was like, you know, really based in reality. Um, with this cover up, like I don't think that um she was like logically thinking at the time of the crime, um like a sane person would that would try to cover up a crime. So, and she, just the things that she did to the like corpse afterwards to just suggest some weird stuff. Like, apparently this is one thing that I thought was super weird, but also suggested to me, like, you know, s- definitely some mental health issues. Is like I think, told the police that she cuddled with his headless body afterwards. Like, also did others like sexual stuff, but just pretty bizarre things. So anyways, that is the history of the incident, and she was like arrested immediately and like talked to the police and like didn't really hold back much. And then she got a defense attorney, and she ended up. I think the first time that I really heard about her, or started really paying attention to her, is like when she attacked her last defense attorney in court. Um, and then her current defense attorney took over. And he was asked whether or not he felt in danger at the time, just because she'd also like thrown a chair at like one of the psychologists that was evaluating her. Um, and yeah, she was like, had her defense attorney was kind of like, I just built rapport with her, and like, I think it became clear pretty early on that like I was working for like to benefit her, and I think she just gained trust in me, and I was never like afraid of being assaulted. So I think that says a lot, and I think that, you can't necessarily say that it's true for everyone, but I mean, for the most part, like, I mean, I guess some people do randomly attack people like out of psychosis or, command hallucinations and stuff, but it's really rare. And like, like there usually is a triggering behavior or something that happens that triggers an individual to like want to act out, and I'm not saying that, I'm not blaming at all, but, I think just, giving someone just some simple respect goes a long way, even when you're dealing with severely mentally ill people. So just yeah, a little bit of background on Taylor. Um, she it sounded like maybe didn't have the best upbringing. Like um, it sounded like her mom, or so her dad testified at her trial, and like her mom apparently passed away when she was like 10 from liver failure. To me, that suggests someone who has substance abuse issues, probably literally like drank themselves to death at like a pretty young age. I don't know about Taylor's history in terms of like who she lived with during her childhood, but it sounded like her mental health issues kind of started or showing more significantly once her mother passed away. And that was like around the time that Taylor was like 10 or 12 years old. But to me, like, I would think that um, Taylor probably experienced people that grow up with parents with severe substance abuse issues, like severe to the point where they literally die of liver failure due to substance use, which I can't say that it was due to substance use, but Um, let's just say perchance it was. That's why her mom had liver failure. Um, most children growing up with that severe of substance abuse within their like nuclear household usually have, a history of neglect and abuse as well. And a lot of times individuals who do experience different types of psychoses and serious and persistent mental illnesses. And this isn't everyone, but there are like a large portion of individuals who experience kind of um, psychosis that have like a childhood history of trauma, abuse, assault, or traumatic brain injuries. So, like, if you get in an accident, like something actually physically happens to like your neural wiring, like within the brain, can also impact whether or not someone like increases the likelihood of someone experiencing some of these cognitive deficits, including serious and persistent mental illness. So, anyways, Taylor, I guess sounded like started showing psych symptoms around the time that she was 10 or 12. I would question if she wasn't even showing them beforehand. I don't know enough information, but I mean, if her mom died at 10 or 12 and she started showing symptoms then, I'm like wondering if maybe her mom just was her primary caregiver and like Taylor was like, already showing maybe some mental health symptoms, but her mom was maybe not completely present and like attending to Taylor to be able to identify different um, issues that Taylor might have been having before 10 or 12. But that's all kind of, speculation. But uh, potentially, I think that could make a lot of sense that, yeah, that Taylor probably has like a pretty significant childhood history. And either way, even if she doesn't, like she started showing and becoming involved, it sounded like with the mental health system when she was like 10 or 12 years old, which is really young. And she's sounded like been in and out of different um, behavioral health programs. And she has had, it sounds like, many different mental health diagnoses over the years. Um, and she was actually civilly committed in like 2021, which is pretty significant. So a civil commitment is where an individual is found to be like unsafe to themselves or to others, like due to like you know cognitive deficits, like maybe amnesia or something, or serious and persistent mental illness or like traumatic brain injury, stuff like that. Like, but so if someone is psychotic or is experiencing psychotic symptoms and is paranoid and like thinks that the government's out to get them and then tries to start like attacking every, firefighter that they see on the street or something, they end up, getting kind of in the attention of the state or like the government because they're attacking firemen or whatever the situation is that gets them involved. Like sometimes it's like they just don't take care of themselves enough where like they're end up getting found like at their apartment and they have like, super long toenails because they're just like not taking care of themselves and they have like horrible diabetes and they're about to die because like they haven't been able to like keep up like, taking care of themselves because they're like, experiencing such bad psychosis or symptoms that they can't just physically take care of themselves anyways in those extreme situations where people aren't on medication or the medication's not working or something, um, an individual will can get civilly committed, and that means that for a small amount of time, it's usually in increments of either 90 days or 6 months, and it's like since we do live in America and like autonomy and an individual's right to have a say over their own body and what they put in it, like medications or like how they take care of themselves or how they what they decide to do with their own bodies is kind of, um, you know, hypothetically in America, that is like what we stand our ground on. But, what just happened this year with women losing their right to um, autonomy over their own bodies is, you would beg to differ. And also some of the COVID restrictions are a little, on that same line of, um, uh, you know, Americans want the government usually to stay away from telling them, what they can and can't do with themselves. So when someone gets civilly committed, it takes a lot for them to get to that point. You have to have like significant proof and documentation to show that an individual is like not safe to themselves or that they're dangerous to others. Um, and then they will start working with the social worker and they'll kind of like be under the watch of the state for, 6 months. And then every 6 months they have to reapply and show that like they still need to be on the civil commitment for whatever reason. And then if they show that they're doing better, then they can get off of it. But then if they ended up, showing um, issues down the line again, then they would have to go through like the whole procedure again. And then that's separate, like at least in Minnesota, civil commitment, but it sometimes it goes hand in hand is with this other thing called the Jarvis order, which is where an individual is like court ordered to take medications. So like a lot of people, especially with psychosis or like schizophrenia, like have super bad paranoia. And especially like when now you're like having the government get involved and telling you like what you can and can't do. And then they're like, oh, and you need to take these medications. And then the like paranoid and delusional person is like, well, of course I'm not going to take, medications that the government's giving me because the government is trying to poison me with this medication. So it's like hard to get them to actually like take their medications, and also because of a lot of the psychotropic meds, like really do impact in individuals like whole body. Like it can make them gain weight. Like it really makes someone feel a lot differently than what they're normally feeling like. I mean, even for people that, aren't having extreme, psychosis or hallucinations and delusions or whatever, just maybe people that have like bipolar, even when they get on a mood stabilizer, they'll talk about how they feel like they're kind of like not themselves anymore. And they have had a lot of advances in psychotropic meds from like, back in the day, like where people would like walk around, almost like with lobotomized due to like from meds, but they've made like a lot of improvements, but still like the meds are pretty hardcore and they can really impact individuals, like just well-being. And so anyways, that's another reason why people like don't trust the medications because they start taking it and then they're like, wait, this makes me feel shitty, I don't want this. So anyways, then that type of process is called a Jarvis order. And just to give you a little bit of my background, I have I worked in the mental health field. I've worked in the mental health field for like the last 15 years, and I have trained as a doctoral level forensic psychologist. But before doing that work and doing actual like psych evals and stuff in prison and like forensically, like I've actually completed some of these like um, not guilty by reason of insanity reports and whether or not they're considered to be competent to stand trial. So I've actually completed and worked with a private psychologist doing some of those, and then worked in the prison system with individuals doing psych evals and determining like diagnostic impressions and recommendations in terms of like referring them to a psychiatrist for medication or you know just what they're experiencing and how to deal with it within the prison system. I've done that, and then also before I started doing stuff as a clinical psychologist, I worked for 10 years at a mental health facility. And that was like, I started working there after I graduated from undergrad, and I got my undergrad education in psych and criminal justice from the University of Minnesota, and I worked at the this mental health facility that was like a bed or 212 bed living facility, and everyone that lived there had a serious and persistent mental illness. So like 85% of them had schizophrenia, and then the rest of them, had some other type of like severe issue in terms of like cognitively or I mean, there wasn't people really that were low, like developmentally delayed at all, but like it was all mental illness. Like they had to have like it was considered to be like a Rule 31, which is like a whole other weird statute thing. State by state like does it differently, but it was a really cool facility. I worked there for 10 years. And so I saw, there was like kind of a rotating client base of those 212 beds. Some of the residents like stayed there the whole time that I worked there, but then other people, would leave like within a week. And so I got to see like quite a few different presentations of, um, you know, severe mental illness and got to know just different, yeah, presentations of hallucinations. And I don't know, I feel like I have a pretty good grasp on understanding serious mental illness. And I also worked with individuals like in that same facility and then also in the prison system that were considered to be like not guilty due to for reason of insanity. Like so in Minnesota they're called mentally ill and dangerous, so they get the classification of MIND. And then but it seems like I'm not exactly sure how Wisconsin does it, but it sounds like they have something similar. Um, so, anyways, um, in terms of Taylor's case, jumping back into that, sorry for that little tangent, but just to give you a little background there on like how the court systems like work with that stuff. So in Wisconsin, there's two phases of the crime, as I mentioned earlier. So there's the first part that determines whether or not the person is responsible for the, what they were accused of in the current crime. So Taylor was found guilty last week of first degree um, killing Shad, and then also, like I said, the other assaults on his body, or corpse or whatever. And then the second phase was to determine whether or not she was going to be held responsible due to mental illness. So, they know she did do this, but was she mentally ill at the time? And if she was, then that would mean that she would be considered not guilty for reason of insanity. And everyone thinks that like, oh, you get off like if you don't get found guilty due to reason of insanity, like you're not gonna get the same justice that you would otherwise. And that's just honestly it's just not true, and it's like not safe for the general public um or the um perpetrator who's struggling with mental illness. And I'm just like really confused about how in the world this jury last week determined that she wasn't mentally ill at the time of the crime. And so I know like in Minnesota that there is like what they say, and it's so silly to me because this is the other thing that I have a problem with is, like why are the legal definitions of mental health disorders and whether or not what's determined to be someone that is mentally ill, like why is that not the same? Because it's not the same as like legal definitions of mental illness. So I just don't understand like why, um, you know, people who I just don't understand why they don't go hand in hand. So basically, what the law says is like if you knew right from wrong at the time of the crime, then you are not considered to be insane or whatever, mentally ill at the time of the crime. So you're held responsible. And like the way that people determine this, like when a psychologist, like a clinical psychologist, like like I used to do, would evaluate whether or not someone was um, not guilty due to insanity and like what their mental state was at the time of the crime, which is really hard to determine, like what someone's mental state is at any point, period. Um, but for a jury of 12 peers who have like zero background in mental health, um, I I just don't know like why we're expecting them to know what that individual maybe was experiencing in their mind at the time of the crime. And then I just don't know also like why legally like if right from wrong, if like why that's considered whether or not you are insane. So it's such like a small sliver um of competency. Like I mean it's just like basically you had to be extremely so one person that I know that I worked with in Minnesota is an individual. She had um, served her time already. She was out of the state hospital, which they end up going to. So if you're found not guilty by reason of insanity, you end up going to a state hospital. But it's like a it's considered Department of Corrections. So it's also Department DHS like health too, the Department of Health. So they kind of overlap because it's like civilly committed people because they were considered to be like found not, mentally ill and dangerous, which is like a form of civil commitment. So you're like kind of always being watched over by the state. And so it's like a state hospital for civilly committed people, but also then a correctional setting and like with security measures within that state hospital because they are considered to be mentally ill and dangerous. So it's kind of like a very specific thing. But I mean, it's like people try to make it seem like it's all cush. Like people like go and like, sit at some resort, like some super nice, like, mental health program, but that's not true. Like, I mean, those programs are okay, like whatever, but like you're still in prison, like you have guards, like it's like, the entrance to the facilities are, you have to go through lock keys, like there's correctional officers there, like it's and then on top of it, you also have like an entire mental health support staff for you. And what the purpose is like you end up serving your time um there, but like you end up, some depending on what the crime is and like what the case is and how what was found between, of course it's different for like every judge because you don't really have a good system that's fair like across the board. But yeah, so some people will, get 15 years, but then it's if you're mentally ill and dangerous, like you can't just like get out of the state hospital because your time is up. Like you are civilly committed. So if you're not functioning well and if you're still considered to be um unsafe to others or like they can't trust you, like you're not gonna get out. Like they'll keep you in there forever. And if you do start getting better, then they'll very slowly start letting you back into the community, like very small steps, baby steps, and you'll constantly be under the watch of some type of social worker or like people will have an eye on you in the community if you ever even fully are allowed to live autonomously. Like most people that are found to be like not guilty by reason of insanity or mentally ill and dangerous, like they usually won't ever like get out and be living on their own usually for the most part. Like I mean, I guess I shouldn't say that. I don't know for sure. I mean, some people do, but I mean, it's pretty rare. And I just don't understand why people don't see that as like, you know, something that would be helpful to have these extremely sick people be under the watch and have the support of um, people moving forward. They've obviously proven themselves to be dangerous. Like Taylor Schabusiness, like, like did some really creepy stuff and, you know, uh, killed someone. So it's like I just don't know why we wouldn't want to address those factors that are contributing to those things that like, are impacting her decisions. So if you find her not guilty, then um, by reason of if you find her guilty and that she was mentally, competent at the time of the crime, or she was like, with it, and so she is, guilty, um, then they go to prison. And when you go to prison, like the mental health support in the prison system is such shit. It's crazy. I did psych evals at Stillwater Prison in Minnesota. I also did psychosexuals. Okay, well, I'll just talk about Stillwater. I did general psych evals for the entire population at Stillwater, and it's about 2,000 inmates or offenders at Stillwater. It's like a moderate level. No, it's level 4 security prison. So Supermax is the only one above that. So it's a max security prison, and it's like 2,000 dudes, and uh, the entire mental health department for the entire prison. And that's including therapists, um, and clinical psychologists who did like what I did, which is like doing the initial assessments. And then, there was like a therapy support staff otherwise. So, okay, in total, it was like 10 to 12 people for 12,000 men. And like all of those guys are in prison. Like I would assume anyone in prison is probably dealing with some mental health issues. And for the most part, people that are like in prison have usually had some type of brain injury, like, or I shouldn't say, yeah, like, I mean, head trauma and also you know other um trauma like living on the streets or like experiencing like whatever crimes that they're involved with and like their upbringings and stuff like so I mean I would say most people in prison like wouldn't not benefit from having mental health support. So I just don't understand why we're not wanting to give this like to those people. Like it actually makes them more dangerous to like release to the community when we're not like actually acknowledging that they are struggling with these mental health issues. Like, I mean, I worked with this one guy so I worked at another max, like doing, that was like more where I was doing kind of like therapy. And I was doing therapy with this guy, and he had delusional disorder, and he was in jail. Well, he had like a probation violation. Most people are in. I'd say the majority of people that are in prison currently, it's because of a probation violation, which is another kind of crazy thing. Um, that I think people don't realize, like when you're found to be legally insane, like I said, like that's gonna follow you for like your whole life. Like you're always gonna have a social worker kind of watching over your shoulder. But like in terms of like when you go to prison, like you're not gonna get that same support. Like once you're done, like unless you're like, if you screw up on probation, then you come back to prison or whatever. But like, if you can get past that without screwing up, like, or if you just serve out your entire time in prison, which my dude was like thinking about doing, because he was like, I always screw up when I get out because I'm not taking care of myself and I don't have assistance. I don't have like health insurance or a social worker or whatever. And the dude was like seriously mentally ill, like he was super sick. And he was in there because of he had some crazy delusions and he ended up like kidnapping this woman and Ring her. And it was all based off of like his crazy kind of like paranoid thoughts and like he did have substance use issues, which I mean, same with like Taylor Schabusiness, like a lot of people do like have mental health or substance abuse issues that have like mental health issues or like are involved in the prison system. So it is kind of hard to decipher whether or not it's substance use or it's like psychosis or whatever. But I mean, ultimately, does it really matter? Like, I mean, if these people are still experiencing these symptoms, like, don't we want to address that because that is like what's creating them to kidnap people and like try to like kill them. So I just don't really see what the benefit is. And I'm like also wondering like if the jury understands what the implications are of like finding someone to be not guilty for reason of insanity or like versus guilty. Like, I mean, do they think that when they say, "Oh no, you're responsible for it. You can't play us and try to pretend like you were actually mentally ill, even though you have this crazy long history and very obvious documentation, numerous people testifying that you have significant mental health problems, um, somehow they're still, are like, nope, you're responsible. It's like, do you know the implications for that? Like, I don't think that that's benefiting anyone. Like, I really think it makes things like more dangerous. So, and not to mention the people that are really mentally ill, like, in prison are really likely to be like exploited. Like they're not gonna go in prison and like be all crazy or whatever. Like they usually end up getting, you know, hurt while they're there because they're considered to be kind of vulnerable populations. Like mentally ill people are much more likely to be victims of crime and um, like violence than perpetrators of it. So, all right, well, I think that about wraps it up. I have definitely talked too much as usual, and this video is longer than I thought it would be as usual. Um, I'm sorry for not being a better speaker. I'm gonna work on my likes and ums in the future. I just reviewed everything I just recorded and definitely noticed that. So my apologies to everyone that has to listen to that and is annoyed by it. Hopefully I will get better with more experience. But I hope that everyone that watched it all the way through learned something. And even if you didn't watch it all the way through, you probably aren't hearing this. But if I hope they learned something too, even if they clicked off earlier. Um, but please feel free to comment down below with any reactions, questions, thoughts, suggestions for me, or reactions and opinions about things I presented in the video. I already have plans for my next psychologist reacts. For I think I'm gonna do a video on just my thoughts on the whole Lizzo lawsuit and speak on just the impact that bullying can really have in a workplace situation. I can speak to that from a pretty intimate personal history of it, and also having studied it due to kind of my um, historical trauma of being bullied in the workplace, specifically the Minnesota Department of Corrections, actually. So I will expand on that in the next video. But anyways, thanks for being here. I appreciate all of you, and please, if you like the video, like it and subscribe. And I will see you guys all in the next one. Peace and love. Bye.